Leadership as a visualization process. Management is a doing process. You need to be able to create a future that you can articulate in a way that everyone else can see it.
It probably comes from their own inability to be self-aware, possibly to control their own emotions. Emotional regulation, I think, is one of the key things anyway. If you are hyper tense, angry, if you're focused on driving the business forward, you're not necessarily controlling your own emotions. You're not aware necessarily of how that's impacting on the people around you.
Technology is reshaping how we lead, and a new generation is demanding something very different from their leaders.
Leaders are willing to learn, they're willing to innovate, and I think those that don't get left behind.
So welcome back to the Lead Forward Show. I'm your host, Dean Whitby, and this is episode 4. Today we're digging into a huge challenge for businesses, the leadership gap. In a world moving faster than ever, companies are scaling quickly. Technology is reshaping how we lead, and a new generation is demanding something very different from their leaders. And the question is, how do we prepare them and ourselves for what leadership looks like next? So to explore that, I'm joined by two brilliant minds who see leadership from very different but equally essential perspectives. So we have Sandi Goddard. Welcome. She's co-founder of Goddard Delaney and brings a deep background in marketing growth, strategy and culture transformation. And she helps businesses, leaders align brand, people and performance, guiding organizations from growth right through to exit, while keeping their teams and the purpose intact. And David Roylance, founder of Speak to Shine, is a high-performance coach who helps leaders and professionals communicate with confidence, elevate their presence, and get paid what they're worth. His work turns expertise into influence, helping people speak powerfully and lead from the front. So together, we'll unpack modern leadership and what that looks like, what it truly demands from the mindset and visibility to communicate and succession, and how the next wave of leaders can bridge the gap between potential and performance. So welcome, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dean.
So starting with, why do so many businesses struggle to build their future leaders?
Well, it probably comes from their own inability to be self-aware, possibly to control their own emotions. And just emotional regulation, I think, is one of the key things anyway, because if you are hyper tense, angry, if you're focused on driving the business forward, you're not necessarily controlling your own emotions. You're not aware necessarily of how that's impacting on the people around you. And therefore, it's not going to be easy for you to be aware of how your team is responding emotionally. Right, that's how I would read it as a starting point. What do you think?
I think that's true. Not only do the next generation of leaders not look like the previous, they sort of feel differently too. And I think that's where the disconnect comes in. So, you know, there's an age-old thing that people think, oh, I'm just like this and they're just like that, and I piss them off, they piss me off. That's just the way it is. A kind of limited view of what people are like and what people can be. And what happens is both sides of the equation start to settle into that kind of thinking, which then encourages people just to be annoyed with each other rather than reach out.
Yeah.
It creates a big problem, doesn't it? And I think, you know, I think of managers as like this. It's this role that sits between the board and the vision, and often they don't really give the managers essentially what they need upwards to really go and deliver that vision. They give them bits and pieces, and then the managers have this kind of key skill set, or maybe they don't, but they should. And then to take that and kind of do the visionary bit, and to try to be leaders and try to get the employees and the staff to come up with, to buy into that vision and to do the work and to do that journey. And then often the employees feel that they're not listened to by the board, and the board feel that, they're not doing the work. And there's this godforsaken role in the middle that actually requires huge skill. And what are the possibilities? So, there's a stat that came from a government survey that said 39% of UK employees from that survey believe that their manager does not have the sufficient training or skills for their role. So that's one thing, like not having the skills. But even if they did, difficult role when you're stuck in the middle, and probably the hierarchy don't give you the praise that you need, and neither the employees either, because when there's a success, the hierarchy claim the success.
Yeah,
I think if we go back to that leadership role, and actually what David has just been talking about, we're talking about relationship management. So we're talking about that building that rapport, that communication strategy that isn't necessarily there, and that goes all the way through from top down and then back up again. I would call that interpersonal intelligence.
yeah.
And it's not there. And well, it's rarely there. I shouldn't say it's not there, because that's not true. Some really great companies out there are very skillful at communicating. They don't just transmit, they receive as well. And that, I think, is part of the core of good leadership, hearing what's said. So
Well, there was another stat as well. I've thrown out all the stats early on, aren't I? Because Quarterdeck said that 82% of managers enter leadership roles without formal training. And so is this kind of what's the possibility?
Yeah.
And
I think
sadly,
that's an insane thing to put all those managers into leadership role, because I think management and leadership are two different things. I think management is an operational role and leadership is a strategic role.
and I think if you're actually going back to that rapport, that communication, as you say, David, it's very much strategic, and good leaders are constantly keeping an eye on how people are doing. They're not just thinking they're good at making those nuts and bolts, so I'll make him a manager. They actually see that that person is actually leading. That person is actually driving forward the other people in the team. They would make a good manager.
Yeah.
Because it's the people skills that we're looking for. Not whether you're a good auditor, a good accountant, whatever the actual nuts and bolts of the job are. It's those really strong people skills that you need. You need people to believe in you in order to move forward. So
and there's going to be a lot of organizations that are in that situation that you explained, David. It is what it is. It's them and us. And how do you, it's, that chasm of energy shift. How do you do that? And what are the possibilities? And I guess that's what the nubs of what we're discussing, what the next generation of leaders needs to look like that the last didn't have to do.
Well, I'm working with a consultancy, a business development consultancy at the moment, with a group of managers who the leadership want to know who are the next emergent leaders. And what's fascinating is the story that they are telling themselves about themselves in the room. And one of the biggest stories that this group of people are telling themselves is, well, actually, we're the people who are doing, and what we want is to be the leaders, because if we're the leaders, we can spend all day staring out the window.
I think they definitely need your training, David.
And I kind of come back to that idea of strategic versus operational. That's what operational people think strategic is.
Yeah.
And in many ways, it's like, rather than working in the business on, look, here's a task, go do it. you are thinking. I mean, in a way, it is a case of looking out the window. If looking out the window is what helps you get the ideas that allow you to then take a lead in a business and the trajectory that a business is going to take. That's what leaders are for.
Yes, I also leaders are willing to learn. They're willing to innovate, to learn new skills. And I think those that don't get left behind.
Yeah.
That's not leading either. So
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Sandy. That's really important because of how fast, a changing world that we have, economically and business-wise across the board. So it probably leads us on to discussing how that's changed perhaps over the last 5 years, or what's different now, and why is it as important now to keep upskilling, just to stay in the game and to be effective as a leader.
I think the two things that have changed. One is the attitude of that next generation. This isn't new. Every generation thinks the people above don't know what they're doing. But I think what's crystallized over the last few years is that lockdown period where people started to think, I'm not prepared to put up with X, Y, and Z. And they come out of lockdown thinking, right, this is what I want out of my job, my role, my leaders. And that, of course, and tie in that with how fast AI is changing, how fast technology is changing roles as well as businesses. It's removing roles from the marketplace. So I think there has to be some balance between what you expect out of the company and also what you're prepared to compromise in order to keep your job.
Yeah.
It's going to be a balance, but life is balancing. But I think when you're young, it's black and white. I remember a conversation with my teenage children about that. And I said, sometimes life is grey.
Yeah.
That's called compromise.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not just down to the leaders then. There's an ownership from the work
on both sides. Yeah. And I also think lockdown has brought about a huge level of a lack of self-confidence.
Yes, absolutely true. Yeah. I see.
And I presenting yesterday to my consultancy, and I was sharing with them a technique of influencing, and the main resistance in the room was, but what if I'm wrong? What if my idea is wrong? I can't put an idea forward because it might be wrong, and the idea that you have to have confidence in your ideas, otherwise you're just not going to be visible at all.
And you have to share those ideas, don't you, in order for them to develop and grow.
Yeah.
I mean, no idea is perfect. That's why it's an idea, a concept.
Exactly. And an idea isn't real yet. It's only real if other people buy into it. So there's a level of which, if you have an idea and you want to take your idea and be influential with it, you have to have confidence in it to be able to take it to the open marketplace where it can be tested by others and others' opinions.
And that comes back to that communication angle, that you have to be open to feedback.
Yeah.
Change isn't something to be scared of. Sometimes you may have to adopt or adapt to your idea or adopt other people's ideas in order to become more successful, to have something that is actually saleable. So.
Yes.
Yeah, and equally, I think you need to be brave and courageous to share ideas, but equally as well to brave and courageous to realize that you might not be the cleverest person in the room, and to collect ideas, and then maybe to have the courage and to move forward and choose which ideas.
Yes.
So there's all of that, like holding back for fear of failure is where it all falls down.
And good leaders recognize that you don't want a board or a team full of people just like you. You
Yeah.
need all those other brains in the room, even if it's uncomfortable sometimes, because that's how your business grows.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure you've
So,
got membership organizations where they're all the same age, because they've got to a point where they're so comfortable they didn't invite people younger than them, and eventually it stagnates and dies, you know.
so let's have a look at a real world example and talk about what the leaders might look like in those businesses. So let's pick a business. So what's the business that we can kind of dissect and look at? You know, if they have leaders and where those leaders are going to come from, you know, what skills might they need, and if they are being promoted into leadership roles, then you know what might be those areas to develop that are going to be needed. So let's pick any business you can pick.
Well, shall we talk about a sector rather than a business? So we could talk about the manufacturing sector,
Yes.
which sadly isn't as buoyant and as large as it once was.
Give me an example of so we can be a bit more specific, like a type of manufacturing business. What might they manufacture?
Okay, a packaging manufacturer.
Oh, very interesting. Okay. So, and what does that normally look like? So they're going to be quite a sizable entity, probably. And so how many managers and leaders might they have?
Well, shall we say they've got about, I don't know, shall we say 150? So that's quite a sizable company, isn't it? And within that company, there are going to be possibly 5 or 6 departments. We know there's going to be finance, there's going to be a board. So there's finance director, marketing director, sales director, managing director, production. Probably.
And so we'd call them the leadership team, would we? They would be the leadership team, and then we'd have managers sitting underneath them.
And underneath them, there would be operational, production, sales, marketing, finance, probably admin. So say six or seven. Oh, maybe health and safety, because if it's manufacturing, they're going to have that. Maybe training as well.
We're talking like 5 to 15.
Let's say 8 managers, say 8 departments, 8 to 10 managers.
Eight people that you need to be bought into the vision from the board and with the skill set to lead forward. And so where they're likely to have come from. So, you know, the CFO is likely to either come through the financial department or come from another company. So so it's really important that they understand the values and the goals of the company and how everybody buys into that and how they deliver that down. And obviously that would be the same for, you know, the sales side of things could have come from similar groups.
Say they've got an international spread, then their sales teams might be across the world.
Could be global, yeah.
So that's a very difficult one to, because then, I mean, there's going to be lots of different cultures within a manufacturing business anyway, because skill sets you're looking for. And then on top of that, you've got the cultures of your sales team. So that's quite a difficult thing to make into a very integrated, cohesive unit.
And so what skills needs to sit in this kind of, this is what I want to get to. I want to kind of share, like, what are we thinking about? What skills do those people need to have in order to do that? Because
tell us what a sales director would have and a sales manager would need, because it's an area you know really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think certainly if we're talking about, you know, the next generation of leadership, and we're talking about bringing the Gen Z and millennial talent through to being the you know, the sales directors of tomorrow that are going to become the leadership team. And so it's them that we really need to nurture. So one is, if I am a sales director, I'm probably a dinosaur, dare I say it, in a lot of cases. So I've been around, I know what I'm doing, but actually what I've got to think about is the next generation thinks differently, acts differently, values things differently. So I've got to be open to understanding and creating an environment where people can reach out, can share their honest opinions, right or wrong, can communicate, can collaborate. And so culture, how do you build a culture? And that's one thing that I would be looking for. If I was the CEO and I'm bringing in someone to do that role, it's an incredible, that's the heartbeat. Sales is the heartbeat of any organization. It's the engine room for that growth. So it's really important that I understand the vision from the top and I understand the people. And I think they probably would want to be able to move into nurture mode. So can they understand what the life goals of those people are? Can
What
they
I
understand? Yeah.
is with companies, similar companies, where instead of imposing the values on and ethos on the team, you find what their values and ethos are. And generally speaking, everyone has very similar values about trust, honesty, timeliness, connection. Some say love, but it's engagement, basically, warmth. So most people have, across the world, have similar values. So once you identify what your team's values are, it's very easy then to adopt them up through the chain because they should reflect the company.
And even if the company is very clear about what their values are, there's you got to be kind of you got to stand for what you are as a company. But on the other hand, I really like Apple's view on this. I watched a video of Steve Jobs talking the other day, and what he was saying that before they went public, 80% of the ownership in Apple were Apple employees. After they went public, and still a high percentage, but after they went public, 50% of the ownership in Apple were the employees. And he used to say to them, you work for the company first, and then you work for whoever your boss is. You own the company, and then you work for whoever your boss is. And that's a really great attitude because then they're bought in and aligned to the vision. Everyone's got the same value and goal. And it's so incredibly powerful. Not saying every business has to do that and have employee share schemes. They don't. But they do have to have everybody in the same boat, rowing in the same river to the same destination. It's how you do that for the sales department.
It's very difficult. Can be very difficult to understand that. What's your view?
I think that listening is a key asset. People tend to go through life thinking that they need to be agreed with, and actually people don't need to be agreed with. But so many conversations from the top down are like, agree with me, do what I say. And then you end up with people who, and do you remember in our one of our previous sessions, you said that looking at values was a key part of people choosing whether they wanted to work for a firm or not.
Yeah, 84% of millennials and Gen Z won't work for a firm if the values don't align.
Yes. And then they get into that firm, and what if they don't actually live the values that they say their values are? What if they don't feel listened to?
Then 74% leave within 18 months.
Yes. Yeah. So
they can't, people like you and me.
Well, yes, that is the key. If we want to get down to it, people need a light shone on the bits that you can't see because you're in it. And every time I've worked with a firm where there is some kind of disconnect between leadership and Gen Z or juniors or management who might be looking at becoming leadership, there's always that sense of, oh well, they don't tell us what we need to know, or they don't listen to us or no one's going to listen to me if I go into a boardroom and use your techniques, which speaks
so they need
to a
a
lot
sense of team.
Yeah. And so yesterday I had a team of 12 people, and one of them was saying, oh well, I only know what I'm told. And I said, well, you're in a room with 11 other people who you can consult about their own perspective of this aspect of leadership that you're talking about. And you're like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That people can feel disparate within the team unless the team is working as one.
So another
So,
area of management is sustainability now. Not every company, but in a lot of manufacturing businesses now there's, I mean, the health and safety's been there for a long time, but now there's also sustainability. And look how the company performs in terms of its contribution to global warming or whatever. And again, Gen Z believes strongly, most of them, not all of them, I mean, I know we're generalizing here, but they have a strong connection with the earth, that it has to be looked after, that global warming is impacting every life and theirs and their future children. So it's quite disheartening. In fact, it can be completely demoralizing when a company buys into the idea of sustainability, maybe gets a sustainability manager, but actually doesn't live those values, does not live up to it. And it is actually greenwashing. And all of this comes back to that authenticity, that honesty, sharing the vision, but being true to it, listening to what people have to say within the organization so that you are honest.
and things like your corporate social responsibility, very important. You know, and I think as well, there's lots of kind of, you know, you won't be able to win contracts in tomorrow's world if you don't have these kind of things. So I think that will help organizations to force them to do things that align with millennial and Gen Z stuff. But, you know, equally, there's the present side of things. So there's actually it's okay to have, you know, this as a company, we've heard the values that you want. As a company, we align to those values, and, you know, actually we want to do good as well. And then, okay, so what's the plan to present that to the world? You know, how do you talk about that? How do you articulate that downwards throughout the organization, so that everyone understands your values? And then also, how do you publicly do that? It probably comes into what you do, you know, in the daytime in terms of confidence and speech, and probably what we all do, actually, the three of us. So the visibility aspect, David, for you, you know, how do you get people to speak with presence and hold authority, you know?
Yes.
First of all, of course, David, they have to formulate that vision.
Yeah, they do, and be able to articulate it. I think of leadership as a visualization process. You know, management is a doing process, but leadership is a visualization process. You need to be able to create a future that not only can you see it, you need to be able to create a future that you can articulate in a way that everyone else can see it. Like, really see it in their mind's eye, like they're watching a movie.
That's one of the fundamental differences, isn't it? That what we're talking about here is people aren't just going to work for you just to take the money, just to go home now. I think tomorrow's you know, workforce, they want to see, you know, what are we doing? Where are we going? I want to have a sense of belonging, but also have something they can work for, work towards, work with.
Yes.
And why are you doing it?
Yeah. I have a theory that one of the reasons that people are resistant to change is because change reminds us that we are mortal. And when things are exactly the same every day, day in, day out, we get the same train, we sit in the same office, we talk to the same people, you can get a false sense of security that life will always be like this. And then when change makers come in, or something comes in that threatens to shake that status quo, there's a resistance to it because it reminds us that we're not immortal. And so when I'm working with a team, I might ask a question that almost never will they have thought of, is who do you want to be in a year's time? And what do you want to be doing in this world in a year's time that you're not doing now? And they're like, oh, I haven't really thought about that. And that's where leadership is a visual construct because it's about getting people to visualize their own part in the future that you have in mind. Now that future can change because, like Sandi says, not every plan, not every visualization is going to be perfect, and we have to deal with the fact that there are other people in the world as well, and there are local economies, there are global economies. Things change all the time. But if you have confidence in your vision that you can articulate so that others can see it too, you can at least begin a journey of discovery that you're going to get some feedback on because you're actively doing something. And if you don't have the confidence to take your ideas into a boardroom, then you can't have any kind of impact at all. You know, what's an idea worth? Well, it's worth absolutely nothing until it becomes something that is tangible and real.
Now, if we go
Sure.
back to your original point about the leaders of tomorrow and identifying those leaders, the much of what David has just said, if you're aware of your teams, if your managers are aware of their teams, you can spot the leaders because they're going to be the sort of people David's just described. They're going to be innovators, thinkers. They're going to come in with suggestions about if we did it this way, it would work better. Or if so-and-so did that, because they're really good at that, these are the sort of suggestions that actually start to identify.
If you open up, it's that slowing down to look and to observe and to be aware of who do you have in your team to put into those roles.
Really,
but also,
have quarterly appraisals where they have a chance to identify and talk to these people and say, I noticed last month, this is what you were doing. How do you feel about? And, all those questions that you can ask.
And yeah. And I think as well, because a lot of the time we put leaders into roles that, just because, because they're good at what they do, right? And so when we talk about the skill sets, then it's important that they are people who can live outside of a comfort zone. So we talked about kind of, comfort zone, and we look for that. And so a lot of these people will be thinking, well, if I get promoted, if I'm the boss, I can have a comfort zone. That's not the sort of person that you want to put in there. And that's probably your big hitters. So your big hitters are going to be like, well, then I can put my feet on the desk and look out the window, like you mentioned before, David. That's not who you want to hire. Leave them making the money. Yeah. Who you want to hire is those people that can say, no, I don't want to be comfortable. I'm happy to be outside of my comfort zone at all times and trying to help to drive the company forward. Because if that's true, nothing's that's truly gonna kind of generate growth in life is comfortable. It's always got a little bit of pain, a little bit of something new, a little bit of unknown, a little bit of daring, those kind of things, as well as the observation and how to treat people. There's loads of skills that maybe get overlooked when they're looking to hire the next person for a leadership role.
Nothing magical happens in the comfort zone. And the comfort zone is, of course, back to that idea of mortality and immortality. That's and the more you take that mortality head on and realize actually my time on this planet is actually relatively short. So I need to be thinking about who do I want to be next year? What do I want to be doing that I am not doing now? Where is there value that I could be contributing, but these people can't see it yet?
I remember the owner of a commercial laundry years and years ago, a really successful business, promoted someone to a management role. It was just a little bit too early in this person's personal development. And it was a couple of years later when he was promoted again into the same role, and he just flew with it. So we've also got to think about the individual's personal development cycle. It's not just, yes, they can do it, but are they ready to do it?
Yeah.
That's also an issue because
So I've written down here that some of the things we've been talking about. So we've got they need to, they need to be able to build culture. They need to be able to listen. They need to be able to build a sense of team, everyone on the same journey. Sustainability. They need to be comfortable with the unknown. What are we missing from there? I mean, those are quite some skills if you found someone that has all of that, right?
well, I think comfortable with the unknown. I think sometimes risk takers, but that's a very difficult one because
With skill set. Yeah, you're right though. You want risk takers, but you want them to have the experience to know
yes,
and
that
get more
that's
right.
possibly that's where you need that they need that experience as well, don't they? So you can have people who are wonderful leaders of people, but not necessarily great thinkers. They might be great motivators, but they may not be thinking strategically. So their tactics might be wonderful, but not necessarily the strategy. Simple.
The thing is,
Yeah.
people who are good at managing people tend to be more kinesthetic and tend to be more empathetic, trust to their feelings, have a sense of an energy in a room rather than being visual people. I talk a lot in the work I do about sensory preferences, and every one of us has different sensory preferences in the way that we like to receive information. And because we've got our own preferences, we then have a tendency to want to give information out using our own preferences. But yet everyone else in the world will have a different set of preferences. Now, I know there are 5 senses. There are actually 6 sensory preferences that you can use, and so what we find is the more people's preferences are visual, the easier it is for them to climb. And the kinesthetics tend to get left behind, perhaps at that management level, perhaps even lower.
That's interesting.
Because the feelings are so important, but they're rather less important for the visual people who are busy visualizing. They're the ones that can create slide decks that are really compelling. They're the ones that can tell a story in a presentation.
And they're really powerful ones, aren't they? And what tends to happen to them quite a lot is that someone who thinks they know more shuts them down very quickly. 1 or 2 times, and then they stop doing it. And that's such a shame, but that happens so often.
Well, I do think the 3 most dangerous words in the English language are "I know that."
Yeah.
Those are the 3 words. That's the one sentence that completely shuts everything down. And my response when people say that to me is, well, why aren't you more successful then?
Now I have a sentence that I hear that I think can be really, really awful for people who want to try something new. And that's, we did it before, it didn't work.
Yeah.
You might have done it before, but not necessarily this way,
Yeah. Yeah, you've got to be open. And that comes with experience as well, doesn't it? Whether to, be open to that or not. And sometimes you maybe have to close that off. But
timing is everything, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Orson Welles' Citizen Kane is widely thought of as one of the best films that's ever been made in the whole pantheon of cinema, but yet it flopped massively in 1941 because nobody wanted to see it then. The timing was all wrong.
And that's
what's this rubbish is what they say.
But that's true, isn't it? What is it they say? That's true of Disney, for example. The timing and the amount of stories there are where people have had 100 goes at something, and then it became a worldwide success.
And then how lucky! You're very lucky.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Very lucky that happened for you. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking back to leadership and teams, and the fact that successful businesses, although you might see one person as the figurehead, often there are several people working together to develop and grow the business, and each bringing different skills. So a leader doesn't have to have just be that individual with one strength. The
Yeah.
others have skills that complement and fit for different times within the business life cycle. Because you need different leadership styles depending on the kind of environment you're working in. And that's really
Interesting.
important to acknowledge as well, I think.
There can be a group strategy to it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think so.
Mm.
Right? Because some people work better at taking people forward with a great vision and they have this helicopter view. But then if they hit the buffers or if they have to pivot, they may need one of the other team to come in and say, ah, yes, but now let's stop and look at this and go that way. A little bit, calm down a bit, rethink, rewrite this. So I think that most companies where there's more than one person leading can be really, really successful.
And I suppose as well, because things change so much, and because of like the world that we're going into, that this AI era, and all of the kind of changes economically, and probably in legislation and regulation, and the requirements that are changing so fast now, it's very likely that you have to change, and you have to, and so that is flexibility, and the ability to pivot.
And also acknowledging that governance and compliance are critical to most businesses once they grow. You really don't want to be caught out by legal issues. Financially, it can be disastrous financially. So you need a brain that works with that as well. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think certainly continued professional development is more important now than ever. And I think leaders should be spending hours each week in terms of trying to to upskill. And gone are the days where you've applied your trade, you have the experience, and now you can just lead. And that used to probably be like that, but things didn't change so fast. In a fast changing world, you probably want to keep adding to your bow and maybe invest in the role that you carry. What do you think about that?
I agree, but I also think a lot of people will say, where would I find the time? And I know you find the time, Dean, but not everyone is going to be in the same mindset or the same lifestyle as you. So, it's fitting it in. It's like fitting in the gym, isn't it?
True. Yeah. And that's one of the sheer challenges. And again, I think my personal belief is that we live in a world where it's very dangerous to live on what you have. And so to keep on your toes is so in some ways, I think for a lot of things, it's finding the time. If that's your role and you have that pivotal role between the vision and delivery then isn't it really important that they find the time somehow just to keep up with what's going on? And if they don't, what's the danger to that?
Part of their role, David.
I think we find the time for the things that we choose to find the time for, and actually not finding the time for things is a form of self-sabotage. In the same way that we know that is a self-sabotage, or what if I'm wrong is a self-sabotage. People are always self-sabotaging. That's why they need people like Sandi and myself to come in and shine the light, because people will self-sabotage. We have been mentored, right? Because all human beings have a tendency to self-sabotage, and we all need someone who can shine a light on that when we can't see it for ourselves. And we're likely to make the wrong decisions, or invest in the wrong space, or invest our time in the wrong thing. We all need someone else who can come in and say, do you know what, if you try this, you're going to have a different result. Go on, trust me, give it a go.
I've just done that today. Someone sent me something to look at and I gave my advice freely, willingly, knowing that it would probably not be all taken, and some of it was ignored.
Well, people don't pay attention until they pay. you know.
Well, and also that's that's a valid point, that people have to be people are a bit like, I suppose, they're a bit like radios. If they're not tuned in and they're not ready, then they won't hear.
Yes.
So people have to be ready.
Yeah. And then part of the job is like the reason that this consultancy is bringing me in is to help them identify who are the people who are ready,
Mm,
and who are the people who are still trapped by their own self-sabotage patterns, and
Yeah,
who are the people they absolutely don't want to promote into leadership positions.
I've been used over the years to identify problems within an organization, so that the owner is one step removed, even though they knew something was going on. They wanted me to come in and just shine light, as it were. I've also been used in the past by a professional services company who had someone who was consistently turning up late or being sick. And
mm.
effectively, they wanted her to be coached out of the business. Um, but really, that's quite a cruel thing to say. But really, it was a very, actually, quite a far-sighted idea, because talking to her over a couple of hours, she herself identified how different her life could be and why she was coming in late and why she was sick all the time. And within a few months, she had actually found a better job nearer to where she lived. And
Mm.
all the things she thought might negatively impact her just disappeared because they didn't exist once she started thinking rationally. And I think sometimes we all need that person to bounce off, that coach or the mentor, someone to talk
Yeah.
things so that you can see, actually, that's a bad idea, that's a good idea, that's highly unlikely to happen. All of those problems can be aired and discussed rationally without any emotional strings. I,
Absolutely.
I think. Sorry, David, you're smiling, so you think.
I went when I was a teenager. I left school and I went into a job at that time Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs in Edinburgh, and it was and for me it was like being in prison. You know, we were in an actual H block on an industrial estate at the tail end of the most unpleasant part of Edinburgh. I have never, I don't think I've ever been so consistently unhappy. And I was terrible at that job. And luckily, I found a way out and started focusing on working in theatre, where I really at that time wanted to be working. But imagine if I'd persevered and thought, this is what I ought to do because it's what, you know.
And sometimes in those moments that, you know, you need to have the braveness to move, and that's where the comfort zone versus the unknown. Sometimes the unknown is where all of the magic is, as we've said before. I had a conversation recently with a company, and as you know, we help companies to become mentioned within AI engines. And we've recently started doing automation and building AI agents. And so it's a new offering that we have. So I was sat in front of a company and they have maybe, I don't know, 100 and probably similar to the manufacturing companies that we're describing. So they have 180 employees and 6 or 7 in the leadership team, etc. And the conversation with the CEO, and he was telling me that his problem was that the world, you know, the world has moved, and they do realize that they need to do more about this AI thing, in his words. And so he realizes that they probably do want to be found when someone searches, and they're not. And so,
Yes.
you know, we could talk about that. But the other thing that he raised on the AI and the automation side of things was that within his leadership team, he had people who were scared to do something in terms of any kind of change towards AI and automation, and so they've done nothing. To the point where he had to make a leadership change because the world's changed as he was describing it, and so his business must change, and he realizes that, but he doesn't know where to start. And so bringing in someone who's prepared to take a risk, we talked about that, to be visionary around it, to learn and upskill, and to create teams that can move them forward a little bit into where they should sit in the world, moving forward. And I found that really interesting, because that's exactly the nubs of what we're talking about here, that if they sit with a leadership team that doesn't want to, if the world's changing, they don't want to change because they want comfort, then his business would just, would suffer ultimately in the long run, was the conversation that we were having. And the only way was to make a change. So do you think that's quite common, that as the world changes, businesses kind of think, well, we'll do what we've always done, we'll get what we've always got, and that'll be okay?
Some will, but this is something we haven't touched on yet, and that is the area of resilience and stress management.
Mm.
And that, I think, is a powerful need in this current time that we're going through, because so many stresses on businesses and business leaders. And one of the leadership skills is this ability to cope in stressful times, to lead through crisis. And one of those is obviously to be able to pivot and come up with a new vision, or a vision that's more relevant to the time that you're in, and which is also stressful. It comes back to that thing about change that we were all talking about earlier.
I was working with a group of VAs at an investment firm earlier in the year, and they're being paid about 70,000 a year for the job that they're doing. Whilst I was there, I worked out that with the level of support that's being given to them free, as a bonus by the company, if they had to pay for that sort of, and by that I mean private health, I mean access to therapists, access to all sorts of different wellness initiatives that they had there, and coaching initiatives that they had there for people, that actually, if they'd had to pay for that themselves, they would need to be on 100K. So they were getting at least 30K a year of additional support for dealing with their stress. And one of them had a real struggle. One of the managers I was working with had a real struggle to not resign every day. To not come into work and go, no, I'm not good enough to be here, so I'm just going to resign today.
Ooh, real imposter syndrome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gosh.
Exactly.
What a horrible place to be that is.
High level of support there, of which I was part of during the time that I was working with them, and able to be of help there. But that's an example of the high level of imposter syndrome or stress or lack of confidence, that and particularly people who are high functioning but hugely anxious.
When they first identified imposter syndrome, they sort of segmented it according to gender. And then after a few years realized it actually impacts everyone, regardless of age and gender. And it actually tends to be more high-performing individuals.
Yeah.
It's not just...
Normally it's the people who are very, very good at covering it, so that nobody thinks they've got it.
Yeah. And that is actually really important to point out, because it can be really disastrous for a business. Because sometimes these people end up just coming into work. I've forgotten the term, that where they're just appearing. They're not actually doing the work. They look as if they're working, but they're not achieving anything anymore, because it's gone so far on the spectrum that they just can't cope. So they just don't do anything. They just turn up, don't do anything.
Yeah.
Of course.
There's the old joke that the reason we have all these meetings is to make sure that no action takes place. And there's in which case, why attend the meeting? Well, if I don't attend the meeting, then someone will make an action take place, and it'll be me that has to do it. So I need to attend the meeting to make sure that nothing takes place.
Meetings for meetings' sake, huh?
Yeah,
Actually, that's sometimes an indicator that a company is floundering
yeah,
when you keep ringing and everyone's in meetings, genuinely in meetings.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer. I just think meetings are almost the most pointless thing, because when you're in meetings, the only thing that you're not doing is the work that needs to be done.
yeah.
So they're important, and of course, there's times when only a meeting will do, and you want to bring people together, and those kind of there's reasons for it. But for a lot of businesses, there's just too many meetings. You just cut all the meetings.
And too long meetings.
Yeah.
Does that also apply to things like online forums and groups where you see people constantly sending messages backwards and forwards?
Yeah.
And there is a bit of FOMO there because you think, oh, there might be a business opportunity I've missed because I've not been sitting on this group all day, not doing any work.
Well, it's funny you should say that, and it's probably not in answer to that as a subject, but I want to mention for the viewers the school community that both of you are part of,
Yes.
that we have launched, because I think some of the things that we've been discussing around here. So for anyone who's watching, so we've launched a school community. It's kind of around this idea of community and peer-to-peer, and obviously learning as well. So, if you're in a business and you have leaders, this is probably a really good thing for them to come along to. Why? Because we've got David doing, the speaking and presence. So each week they can learn some things from you. We've got AI and automation. So in there, the kind of, if they don't want their business to fall behind, then they can learn how to build agents and take that away for free. And it doesn't have to be the CEO or the senior leaders. They can send anyone, to come and learn that, and they get the value of that. The generative engine optimization lessons in there to get people, to give them tips on why is their business not being mentioned by ChatGPT. And there'll be some very simple tweaks that they can learn, and then that will just mean that they will go viral on these AI engines. And then kind of, the strategy inside of things. So Sandi, for yourself, it's very hard to get all of this right. And so they've got your time within there and a space where you can take people, how do they grow? And let's get the leadership team to come in there. And then aside from all of that, which is great anyhow to have all of that learning, they've got community, and they've got the ability to post, and they've got the ability to chat to each other. So you imagine that imposter syndrome, for example. Wouldn't it be great if you could then be in a room with 50 other people, and if you could learn all of those skills that you need to deliver leadership in one place and communicate with people? And the things that we wrote down, culture, well, you probably could learn a lot about culture within there, listening and sense of team. Again, if you've got an opportunity to discuss with people doing the same thing, similar kind of businesses, then it's a great opportunity. Maybe there's discussions around sustainability. Maybe there's ideas about how do we produce the next great leaders that can all happen within there. So do you want to tell me a little bit about what you deliver in there, David, that will help people from a, I suppose, kind of leadership point of view, but in general?
And I think imposter syndrome and any sense of self-sabotage that stops someone stepping into an out-of-comfort zone experience. I mean, the most obvious out-of-comfort zone experience that most people will absent themselves from is presenting for their organization. And or they'll do it but not enjoy doing it. Because there's all sorts of stories about them that they're telling themselves about themselves. And I think most simple area of expertise that I can share in an online capacity is how to establish a sense of presence and charisma that draws people to you in any kind of engagement. Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be presenting from the business stage, but it can be. So once
Think-
you're physically in a state of presence, it changes your relationship with your own mind.
And that's going to be really important, David, and poignant when they're trying to deliver the vision.
Yes.
When they're trying to deliver the vision down and then outward to those peers, because there could be investors who want to hear that vision. There's outwards and then there's inwards, I suppose. So that what you're going to teach is really powerful for that kind of area of this leadership problem.
Yeah. And how to articulate that vision so that people can not only see it, but people can feel it. I think of sharing the vision as being both a visual and a kinesthetic experience. Leadership is a visual skill, but if you can create visuals that others can feel in the creation of that future, then the feeling motivates the action. And if what you want is other people to take action on the basis of your vision of the future, then being able to visualize, but not coldly visualize, articulate a vision passionately so others can share your passion whilst you are in a state of presence.
And some, a lot of that I know, having spent time with you on some of these areas, there's an element of in the same way imposter syndrome has the subconscious mind, how we think we show up and how we actually show up. And in leadership, you need to know that you can move people and you can share the vision, share the outcomes. And if you do that and people can see what's in it for them as well, and they believe it.
Well,
but sometimes people speak and they don't believe it, right?
Yeah. Well, nobody cares until they know what's in it for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So David's going to help you with that, which is fabulous. And it's $10 to join. So you can come every week and just do the David thing, or you can join in the community and the peer-to-peer. But
join in the community and go see Sandi as well, and go see Dean.
Yes.
As well.
Well, Sandi, I was coming on to you.
Yeah.
So tell me, how can you help people related to the leadership conversation that we're having? If they were to send their leaders in, how might they benefit in terms of them being able to innovate and become better leaders? But then also just in general, like anyone who's in business or anyone who, I'd be honest, if I was a junior and there was an opportunity like this, I'd come along, because you're going to be networking peer-to-peer. The things you could learn for such a low fee is astronomical, isn't it? But what are you going to help people with, Sandi? Tell us.
They're going to be issues around business that most business leaders face. And what I find fascinating is hearing what other people have done to resolve these issues. And that's where I feel that I call it the growth room. And I feel that the growth room gives all leaders that join us a chance to discuss the problems that they're facing, whatever they may be. It might be we need to innovate. We've got these products, but they're selling well, but we know they've only got a short life cycle. We need to pivot, or we need to innovate. What have you done? How did you resolve this problem? And talking to each other in the growth room allows us to come up with ideas. Either we're going to get confirmation that what we are doing is right, or we're going to get new ways of thinking, new ways of looking at the same problem. And I think that's invaluable. It's definitely worth $10.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even if it's not the leadership team, some of those people who just want to develop and they want to be the leadership team can come along to that and learn from those conversations they see. Even if they don't get involved, that would be invaluable, wouldn't it? That'd be crazily invaluable.
And there are different conversations every week. So we're talking about the style of leadership that works in a particular environment. Another week it might be, let's talk about pivot. So each week the topic is actually drawn from the people who join us. And next week, what shall we talk about? Well, this is an issue I'd like us to cover. And we move forward like that. So, and
obviously the other Yeah, very good. And the other David Adesina, who's not with us for the AI and automation, will literally show people how to build agents from start to finish, so that they can actually go away and build agents. So build web chat bots, how to build onboarding systems, how to build content creation systems, and those kind of things. So that can be really invaluable for the world that we're in at the moment, and people who want a cost-effective resource to learn. Or even, as I say, that would still be valuable to send the younger generation, the next generation, to go learn it, because their brains might be more free. And of course, I'll bring some stuff around generative engine optimization, all that kind of stuff. So there's this kind of, the other thing is as well, what I think is great is that across the 4 people that we have there, that we can look after and nurture and make it a fun space, so they get lots of value. And if you are going to, see it as a community and comment and and post and get involved and be engaged, then we will add our value to that and reciprocate that.
Excellent. I mean, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? $10, and what you're getting for $10 in terms of support is extraordinary.
Well, yeah, and if you think, we just talked about how incredibly difficult it is, and can you imagine the cost that would go into training the next generation? Well, they could learn it all with us, couldn't they? Almost, they could learn how to speak and present and sell the vision, and they've got you two, who already helping businesses at high value, and they can come in, they can learn it all.
And that generation are open to learning and asking questions. David and I did a webinar a month ago, where someone asked we had to actually edit it out. She asked a very personal question about her own role in work, and the whole audience started giving advice.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do we think are the key takeaways, I suppose? So we're going to give to the audience. Is there anything practical that we can give them to take away that comes to mind, other than what we've talked about: culture, listening, sense of team, sustainability, comfort, all those things?
All of those are practical, I think. I think being open and listening and act positively, or acting in a way that affirms what you believe in or stand for. What about you, David?
And definitely everyone should be asking themselves, who do I want to be? What do I want to be doing next year that I'm not doing today?
Seed kayaking.
Yeah.
And I talk a lot about getting buy-in and having aligned value, and not just these are my business values, but actually, if we do have people that are helping us along to our goals as a business, what are they aligned to? And I had a really interesting conversation with an accountancy practice recently, and they're doing very well and they're growing very quickly. And I said to him, AI is going to come along, and how are you going to? What's your approach to that? And how because CW is it CWP say that 80% of accountancy tasks will be automated by the end of next year. That's fine. So that leaves advisory, right? Or business services and the things that AI maybe can't do, the personal bits. And he said, well, no, but that's fine, because I don't actually do that. When I sit in front of somebody and I say, people want accountants to do the numbers and to do a transactional job. He said, but that's not the journey that I take them on. I ask them, what are your goals? What are your values? What house do you want to live in? What car do you want to drive? And we go down a personal road as much as a business road. What are your personal goals and what are your business goals? And if they want to work with me, I cost twice as much. but I'll deliver you from point A to point B within 3 years. You just tell me what your personal goals are, and I'll make sure that we put things into place that we work very differently. And if they then want a transactional accountant that just does the books and records and makes sure they pay the less corporation tax, then so he's not scared by AI because he knows he does something fundamentally more aligned with the
Yes.
goals of the customers. And he was sharing with me that he's done that for 15 years and he very rarely loses a client, and that's unheard of. And he has, fantastic relationships. And I thought, well, that's brilliant. That's the kind of aligning yourselves with the goals and the value. But doing what AI can't do, there's going to be a lot of things that AI can't do there for people. They can't have that personal connection. So, and I know me and you had a conversation, David, recently about what you do and how there are parts that AI could do, but there are fundamental parts, and this is going to be the same for you, Sandi. It's the same for me. There are parts that AI could do, but fundamentally there are parts that are incredibly important that humans need to do and offer and bring. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Yes, I believe that it's the intuitive, personal connection that we make that AI cannot make at the moment. Especially if we're coaching, if we are involved very closely with individuals in giving them advice, actually understanding body language, stress levels, real values and intent, that I think at the moment is not within the scope of AI.
Yeah, I'd agree. And David, in your side of things?
I think the quickest route to making things change for the better for a business is face-to-face communication, where the people who are communicating can see, hear, and feel what's going on in the room and build relationship because they're all present. And that's something that as yet an AI cannot do. For them.
And AI doesn't have pheromones, and pheromones are incredibly important to individual relationships.
I think it's about balance, isn't it? And I think, and this is one thing that certainly leadership teams within older traditional businesses that are going to be slower to change will need to come to terms with, is that there's two views on AI, that it hasn't fundamentally lived up to its requirements, and it's not, it's not very good, or it's cheap is one view. But actually over here, I think, is another view that actually it improves quality. So when we look at it from a content creation point of view, and I can't talk about that because it's what we do, I think we want to position where you move at speed with AI, and you should, because it does give you the opportunity to do that, cautiously moving at speed with AI, but actually fundamentally it should be about making sure that how you make people feel is still a human process, and then the quality is improved with the technology that AI brings. So from a content point of view, that's things like, there are tools like VO3 that creates fantastic video. Gemini just released Gemini 3 today, which can create fantastic explainer videos in seconds, something that there's companies still taking 2 weeks to do, and paying someone, so there are, but ultimately there's this balance between humans in the middle, making sure that it's all great quality. So there's that kind of, I think that's possibly going to be true for leadership, that maybe people could move faster, maybe they could automate some processes, but you need the brilliant minds of humans to make AI anything. And the kind of rubbish in, rubbish out scenario. What do you think about that?
Well, I think rubbish in, rubbish out is a great expression that covers many areas, not just AI. And AI's response is only as good as the information that gets put into it. But then people are somewhat similar in that.
And I think that's a great note to end on.
For sure. Well, thank you both for attending again. Or for attending, it sounds like we've done. But for having the conversation, I think our viewers will find some of the information we've discussed really useful. I'll put a link to the school in the comments and both of your LinkedIn as always. So if you want to come and just kind of get involved with the community, then come to the school. But if you can see the skills Sandi and David or I, and you want to reach out for our proper services where we add the beautiful human brains that we have, then equally they can reach out for that. And yeah, pleasure to have you again.
Thank you very much.